What lengths would someone go to maintain a lie about a pregnancy? Today, we're unraveling the chilling case of Reagan Simmons-Hancock and the fetal abduction by Taylor Renee Parker.
Hey, I'm Garrett, feeling curious today and ready to dive into this intense topic.
And I'm Leah, feeling intrigued and a bit somber as we explore this case. Welcome to Laid Back Learning with Leah and Garrett. To be specific, we'll focus on the murder of Reagan Michelle Simmons-Hancock and the fetal abduction by Taylor Renee Parker.
Okay, so here's where we start. A quick personal story to frame how deception can, spiral in real life. Years ago, a friend of mine dated someone who, it turned out, was using a false identity online and in small day-to-day ways. Not a criminal case, just lots of lies. Different last name on social media, a bogus job title, the whole smoke and mirrors thing. At first, it felt small, like maybe it was just insecurity. But over time, the fabrications stacked up. Photos staged to look like business trips, borrowed jewelry to pose as gifts from clients, and even a fake family connection to a local entrepreneur. It was wild. When the truth finally broke, it wasn't just about the lies themselves. It was the trust fracture. My friend had to rebuild the basics. Who to believe, how to check reality. That took months. What stuck with me was how carefully constructed a persona can be and how the performance keeps going because people validate it. That dynamic echoes here. The deception is way more extreme and criminal, but the pattern of fueling a lie with props and stories, aliases, staged moments, really resonated for me.
Yeah, that tracks. And it sets up the heart of this case. Let's unpack the basics first. Fetal abduction is the kidnapping of an unborn child by removing the baby from the pregnant mother, usually by force. It's rare and it's brutal. And when we talk about capital murder in Texas, we mean a homicide that includes certain aggravating factors. One of those factors is committing a murder during the course of a felony like kidnapping. So, if prosecutors show that the killing happened while carrying out a kidnapping, it can make the case eligible for the death penalty or life without parole.
Right, and that's key here. Another foundational piece is medical. Taylor Renee Parker had a hysterectomy. That's the surgical removal of the uterus, which means she couldn't become pregnant. She knew this. So when she started lying that she was expecting, she was setting up a story that had no possible real ending other than exposure. And as her supposed due date got closer, the pressure mounted. It's like building a house of cards while a fan is running. You can balance it for a while, but eventually the wind catches up.
And to ground that medical point just a bit more. After the crime, hospital staff used objective measures to check Parker's claims. An HCG test, HCG being the hormone produced during pregnancy, showed she wasn't pregnant. An ultrasound and physical exam showed she didn't have a uterus and had no signs of recent childbirth. So the story about giving birth on the road fell apart on contact with basic medical reality.
All right, let's roll on and build the timeline. Parker, born December 1992, also used aliases including Taylor Morton and Taylor Way Casey. Using multiple names can make it harder to track someone's history. Courts tie those records together. In her personal life, she became a mother at 17, had a second child at 21 during her first marriage, then divorced in 2017, remarried in 2018, and divorced again in 2019. Around those years, she was dealing with serious reproductive health complications that led to that hysterectomy after an ectopic pregnancy, which is when a pregnancy forms outside the uterus, usually in a fallopian tube. Ectopic pregnancies are non-viable and dangerous. Professionally, she worked at a staffing agency and at an OB/GYN clinic. Not a medical role, but enough exposure to learn the language and routines of prenatal care. That matters because she later mimicked pregnancy so convincingly. There's also this layer of grandiosity. She told people she was an heiress to an oil fortune. That kind of claim can make even wild stories sound feasible to casual acquaintances. If you seem well-connected, people assume your life is full of exceptions. And into this picture comes Reagan Michelle Simmons-Hancock. Parker met Reagan through photography. She worked as Reagan's engagement and wedding photographer. That professional trust opened the door to Reagan's home and routines. It's chilling. Because it shows calculated access.
Switching gears just a little. In 2019, Parker met Wade Griffin at a rodeo and started dating him. She told Wade she was pregnant, even though she physically couldn't be. Over about 10 months, from late 2019 into October 2020, she staged a very elaborate lie. She used a silicone pregnancy belly, produced fake ultrasound images, held a gender reveal party, even did a maternity photo shoot. Those public milestones create social proof, photos, shared memories, and witnesses to the story. As the supposed due date approached, the pressure to deliver a baby grew. Late September 2020 came and went with no birth. In October 2020, Parker told Wade she'd have a C-section or an induction at Titus Regional Medical Center. Then, in early October 2020, she changed the plan to McCurtain Memorial Hospital in Idabel, Oklahoma, citing a fire at Wade's house and a bomb threat at the hospital as reasons. We should be clear. There's no evidence tying Parker to those disruptions. They functioned as her moving goalposts. A date in October 2020 became the new delivery date, and that's where the case turns from deception to deadly violence.
One morning in October 2020 in New Boston, Texas, Reagan was 21, 36 weeks pregnant, at home with her 3-year-old daughter. Evidence shows Parker arrived prepared. The attack was both sharp and blunt force. Reagan suffered 113 sharp force injuries and 39 blunt force injuries, including injuries consistent with a hammer. The jugular vein was perforated and the skull was fractured. Blood evidence traced movement through multiple rooms, showing Reagan fought and tried to move. Then Parker used a scalpel to perform a crude C-section. No anesthesia, no sterile setting. The medical examiner, Dr. Melinda Flores, concluded Reagan died from the combination of sharp and blunt trauma and the traumatic extraction. A Dallas medical examiner, Dr. Stephen Hastings, concluded the baby, later named Braxlyn Sage Hancock, died from traumatic removal, with bruising on the scalp and umbilical cord, consistent with violent extraction. This is extremely hard to take in. It hits different when you realize a 3-year-old child was in the home. She wasn't physically harmed, but was later found hiding. That detail adds a human ache you can't shake.
After the attack, Parker fled toward Oklahoma with the baby. In DeKalb, Texas, a Texas Highway Patrol officer stopped her for erratic driving. The trooper saw an umbilical cord going down her pants. Parker claimed she'd given birth on the road and that the baby wasn't breathing. She was taken to a hospital in Idabel, Oklahoma, where staff quickly became suspicious. She refused parts of the exam, but testing moved forward. HCG testing and ultrasound showed she was not pregnant and didn't have a uterus. There were no signs of recent childbirth. Meanwhile, Reagan's body was discovered in Texas very shortly after. DNA tests confirmed the baby was biologically Reagan's child, not Parker's. Parker agreed to extradition, meaning she was formally transferred back to Texas and was charged with capital murder, and kidnapping. A grand jury indicted her in December 2020 for kidnapping and capital murder for the deaths of Reagan and her unborn daughter, and in March 2021, a second capital murder count was added for the baby.
The case went to trial in September 2022 in Bowie County. Prosecutors presented digital evidence, Parker's online searches, including how to deliver a baby preterm around 35 weeks and how to fake a pregnancy, which reinforced premeditation. After about an hour of deliberation in October 2022, the jury found her guilty of murder, capital murder, and kidnapping. The punishment phase started in October 2022. Prosecutors argued aggravating factors, including the kidnapping component and the extreme violence, and emphasized the presence of Reagan's young child in the home. The defense urged life without parole, arguing diminished responsibility, basically that mental health and personal history should lessen culpability. In November 2022, the jury unanimously recommended the death penalty, and Parker was sentenced to death. She became the first woman in 12 years to receive a death sentence in Texas.
Appeals followed. In November 2025, the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals, Texas's highest criminal court, rejected her appeal. In March 2026, her counsel filed a petition to the U.S. Supreme Court requesting discretionary review. In May 2026, the Supreme Court denied the petition, leaving the conviction and sentence in place. In the civil arena, Reagan's widower filed a wrongful death suit in October 2022. And as of 2026, Parker remains on death row at the Patrick O'Daniel unit. It's a lot to absorb. Real talk. The legal outcomes here aligned closely with the forensic record and the statutory framework for capital murder in Texas. Here's where it gets really interesting. Was Parker's mental state at the time of the offense considered fairly during her trial? I tend to think mental health and personal history matter a lot at sentencing. Mitigating factors, meaning circumstances that can reduce how severely we judge or punish, can include trauma histories, mental illness, or other psychological pressures. To me, there's a difference between explaining and excusing. And mitigation is about explaining. It doesn't erase harm, but it can shape what we think the appropriate punishment is. In a case like this, I find myself wondering whether there was enough nuance in how the jury weighed long-term psychological needs, the desperation of maintaining a false identity, and the possible distortions of thinking that led up to the crime. Why wouldn't we treat those as meaningful context?
I hear you, and I do think mitigation has a place. But here, the evidence of planning feels overwhelming. Premeditation, meaning you plan in advance, was supported by her online searches and by months of props and staging. She used a silicone belly, held events like a gender reveal and a maternity shoot, shifted hospital stories, and on the day arrived with a scalpel. Then there's the nature of the violence. 152 total injuries, movement through multiple rooms, a crude C-section. Add the kidnapping element, which under Texas law is a listed aggravator for capital murder. If the legal question is whether the state proved a murder in the course of kidnapping beyond a reasonable doubt, it seems like, yeah, that checks out. So, while I respect the role of mental health in mitigation, I can see why the jury saw the planning and the brutality as tipping the scale toward the most severe penalty.
That's a solid point. I guess my question back is this. When someone constructs a false pregnancy for nearly a year, are we looking at calculated manipulation only, or also a kind of delusional attachment to a fantasy life? I don't mean legally insane. That's a very specific standard. I mean psychologically stuck. There's a human tendency to double down when a lie becomes social, and Parker had exposure to OBGYN routines which made her good at faking. To me, that raises the possibility of tunnel vision, where the person keeps choosing the worst option because the alternative, confessing, is too catastrophic to face. It doesn't forgive anything. It just hints at the internal engine. That's something to chew on, huh?
For sure. And maybe the system did engage with that during the punishment phase. The defense did argue diminished responsibility and pushed for life without parole. The jury heard it and still went unanimous for death. Given the forensic detail, the presence of Reagan's child in the home, and the flight with the infant, I can see how jurors prioritized public safety and moral gravity over the mitigation story. Not gonna lie, this one leaves very little daylight between planning and outcome.
On a different note, this case also reached pop culture. In 2026, Netflix aired Maternal Instinct, a documentary about the investigation and trial, and it situated this crime alongside other rare fetal abduction cases. Those programs can help people understand the forensic steps, like HCG testing, DNA confirmation, and crime scene reconstruction, while also reminding us that these are real families, real grief. It's got more weight than it seems when you look past the headlines.
All right, here's another angle to look at. What if the Texas Highway Patrol officer had not stopped Parker in October 2020? If there's no traffic stop in DeKalb, the lie about a roadside birth might have stretched a little longer. Maybe she reaches the Oklahoma hospital without that immediate red flag of an umbilical cord showing. Could the story have lingered?
I think it could have delayed the unraveling, but not prevented it. Hospitals run objective checks. An HCG test is quick. An ultrasound is decisive. Physical signs of childbirth are hard to fake. Plus, Reagan's body was discovered very shortly after. Cross-state coordination kicked in fast. So even if the stop hadn't happened, law enforcement in Texas and clinicians in Oklahoma would have converged on the truth. The investigative timeline might have been messier. identification of the baby's parentage via DNA could have taken a beat. But those medical facts are like gravity. They pull the lie down sooner rather than later.
Yeah, that checks out. I guess the main difference would be in the interim. Without the traffic stop's immediate alarm, she might have had a few more hours to craft new details, maybe try to get social supporters lined up to validate the story. But given that DNA matched the infant to Reagan and the medical tests showed no pregnancy and no uterus, it's hard to see a path where the deception holds. It's like trying to keep a balloon underwater. It pops back up.
And circling back, it's striking how much of this hinged on basic verifiable facts. A hysterectomy means no possibility of pregnancy. A scalpel and the pattern of wounds map premeditation. A child hiding in a back room shows the human toll. Then the legal structure, capital murder during kidnapping, fits the evidence. It's a thread that, once pulled, unraveled the entire story Parker tried to maintain.
Stay curious, keep it chill, and take care of each other.
Thanks for being here with us. And that's a wrap for this one.